Welcome to Family Business World. I'm your host, Dr. Dale Caldwell, and we have what I think is one of the most fascinating guests that I've had, Darin Pepple. Darin, welcome to Family Business World. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Doctor.
Well, Darin, the reason you're here, Sue Slavin and Maura Panuski and I run the Fairleigh Dickinson University Rothman Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and Sue read your book, and she doesn't rave this way about books, but read your book and was so impressed. He said, Darin has to be on one of your shows. And so Darin, it's an honor to have you here. And so I'm going to learn as the audience learns about you and your incredible story. So I'd like to begin, where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to high school?
Yeah. So I grew up, believe it or not, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Amish country.
Amish country, yes.
But not in the farmland, just in regular suburbia there. And at 18 years old, I enlisted in the U.S. Army, went into the Army for a few years, and then got the opportunity to go to West Point and graduated there in 2007. The high school I went to in Lancaster was called Hempfield, if you believe it or not. Served in the Army for about 11 years.
Wow.
Did a couple tours overseas, and then got out of the Army in 2015 and came down here to D.C. and Northern Virginia, went to business school, and then got to work in the defense industry.
So Darin, before you
author and published a book.
Darin, before you go, let's go back, because you have such an interesting story. I want to go. So now, where did you go to business school?
I went to George Washington University in D.C., so literally like downtown Foggy Bottom, George Washington University, within walking distance from the White House.
Nice.
They have a really great business school.
Absolutely.
2-year full-time experience to kind of transition out of the military and learn business verbiage and just a skill set to go from being a soldier to a businessman.
So I want to go back, because again, our audience often doesn't know. So West Point, so you went to West Point. So what was it like to go to West Point? So talk about, what was it, how do you major in, and so often my guests take things for granted, and so they've been doing this stuff for a while. So what was it like going to West Point, and what did you major in, and how did you like it?
Yeah, so West Point is one of the, and I'm partial, but one of the finest academic institutions in the United States.
Yes, sir.
It's a fully paid for academy where you go and you major in, they give you a lot of core courses in engineering, math, physics, chemistry. You actually get a bachelor's of science.
Oh, really?
No matter what you do. And you have to minor in an engineering degree. But I actually majored in military history. Because that obviously fascinated me more. It was a difficult experience, as a military academy should be. But it's funny, in hindsight, it was one of the best experiences of my life. And there's no other greater opportunity and greater group of friends that you can ever meet. But very different from the normal, collegiate atmosphere of go to a university and have fun and drink and party with people and sort of figure out what you're doing. At West Point, you're very much, it's very defined what you do. You have very limited privileges as a freshman. You essentially have to march around the whole time, can't speak, can't talk
to
other people. And it's definitely a military take on higher education.
Interesting. So there you left, and where did you go militarily right after West Point?
Yes. So once you commission out of West Point, first you go off to your sort of officer basic course. So I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for about 9 months, where I learned how to be an artillery officer. Artillery, you shoot cannons, rockets, and missiles at people. So learning that whole targeting and math and that science.
Wow.
Really. And then from there, my first duty assignment was in Savannah, Georgia.
Okay.
There's Fort Stewart, which is right outside of Savannah. kind of in the swampland, that cheap government land, but 45 minutes out of Savannah, and had the great opportunity to be with a highly deployable unit there, the 3rd Infantry Division.
Okay.
And then work hard, train hard with them, and then also live in downtown Savannah, Georgia. It was just the most beautiful city, one of the most beautiful cities in the United States. And I was there for a few years, and would kind of do on and off like tours to Iraq.
Right.
I literally got to Fort Stewart, took a couple of weeks in process, and then I joined a unit downrange in Iraq. Did an 8-month tour with them, came back, had about over a year.
So Darin, before you,
and then did another tour in Iraq. And then came back.
Darin, so what again? Because I want the audience to really get, and we'll get to your book in a second. We're gonna take a commercial break in a few minutes. So what was that like? I mean, Iraq. Everybody talks about that, and they gloss over. They don't realize the significance of your service, the significance of the stuff that you did. What was that like when you went to Iraq?
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's kind of what I try to capture in the book too. Like, hey, if you're just a layman, if you're a person, if you were inserted in Mesopotamia in the Fertile Crescent, what is that like?
Right.
And a lot of people envision Iraq as more of like a Kuwait, with just like sand dunes and things. It is not like that at all. It is very green.
Really?
There's a lot of farmland. Only sort of more out west, like in Anbar province, is it more sandy.
Okay.
There's just a variety of terrain and people, and there's 3 ethnic groups there. There's Sunni, Shia, and Kurds, and these Arabs. That's the demographic of this very volatile but just wonderful country. And the Sunnis are sort of like Protestants, if you would relate this to Christianity. Right. The Shia are more like Catholics. Okay. And then the Kurds are kind of their own different sect.
Interesting.
And these hodgepodge of demographics, because of British colonialism, got thrown together in this country, and then we were there in this very hot place. Just trying to give them a chance at democracy, and stand up a country while fighting Al Qaeda.
Wow,
it's kind of mind blowing. To relate what Iraq is, just casual conversation.
Well, Darin, so one of the things I've been, especially my dad knew and marched with Dr. King, so I grew up in the civil rights movement. Obviously, I'm African American, and the American experience is very different. And they say, well, okay, all right. Black people look different than white people, and so on. And so the Sunni and the Shia, I never really understood how, do people look differently, or how do they know the difference? What is, it just seems kind of crazy. It's like, all right, I thought discrimination was only because people look differently, talk about that, the Sunni and the Shiites. What was the difference? How could you tell one from the other?
You really can't. It's like, can you differentiate between a Catholic and a Protestant?
Right, yeah.
Or a Baptist, or what? You usually can't. So it's almost sort of by the region, by the tribe. Sometimes if they're in the military or the governments, because the governments, the Shia are the majority, the Sunni are the minority.
Right.
So if they're in governments, they're probably Shia, because they favor the majority there. But it's very hard to distinguish unless somebody kind of just broadcasts, by their association or whatever. And sometimes, because you have people who just wanted to survive, would minimize their religious affiliations, because then they don't want to be seen as a Sunni in a Shia-run government. So it's very, very difficult unless somebody would tell you what the religion was.
And it's interesting you talked about the colonialism, because I was in South Africa during apartheid way back in 1986, and one of the things about Africa is that the colonialists would draw these lines around rivers instead of communities, and so they put it's almost like putting the Russians and the Americans in the same place. And so it sounds like that's kind of the same thing that happened, that these artificial lines were drawn, and you put groups, tribes that were naturally in conflict. Is that kind of what happened?
Yes, yes. And if you read the Iraqi history, it's very fascinating. And I mean, you had the end of the Ottoman Empire, and it was almost sort of this hodgepodge, like I think they called it like Churchill's like squiggle, where he was just sort of drawing a line and divvying it up between the French in Syria, and then what the British would have in Iraq. And it doesn't sort of logically make sense. And that's also sometimes too, people are just like, maybe Iraq should split into 3 countries. Maybe there should be a Kurdistan in the north, and then a Shia portion that's closer to Iran, and then a Sunni portion out west.
Interesting. And so I want to go back and I like to really pick up on all these different things. So military history. So talk to me. I've never met anybody who really studied military history, and so is that what were some of the most interesting things you learned as you studied military history?
Oh yeah. So I've always been fascinated. I guess I'm a nerd in that aspect, right? And maybe that's a good reason why I joined the military. Because just to relax, all I want to sit down and read about like the Battle of Britain or whatever. Right. And so West Point is obviously uniquely conditioned to give you some of the best resources to study military history. I mean, they have an arms room with World War II weapons and a whole museum there and whatnot. And you also have like current military officers that would come back from their own tours, and they'd be like, here's what counterinsurgency is in Iraq, and let's talk about the French-Algerian experience or Vietnam or something, and draw connections. Military history then was just so fascinating in this academic environment, because you could specialize and look in certain areas, and what I focused on was World War II.
Oh, really? Oh,
interesting. I could just go deeper beyond the sort of history book bullet points that we always sort of get. We did this because the Germans were bad, and you can just go many layers like deeper as to why did these generals and politicians make these decisions, and what was the counter moves to their decisions, and perhaps what was the mistakes they did, and sort of question a lot of the norms and the popcorn history we sort of learned growing up.
Wonderful. Well, Darin, this is fascinating. We're going to take a short break, commercial break, and we're going to come back, and I want to really delve into the book. But this is, again, Dale Caldwell, Family Business World with Darin Pepple. We'll see you now.
We're Dr. Mark and Liz from Marriage Matters, a show that inspires, instills hope, and empowers couples to weather the stresses of married life.
Join us each week to hear how real couples like you, have overcome challenges that were hurting their marriages, as well as getting expert advice on ways to nurture a happy and healthy relationship.
Tune in Fridays at 4:30 p.m. and Thursdays at 9 a.m. on RVN TV.
The new Kentucky Fried Chicken Sandwich with brioche buns, mayo, pickles, and a quarter-pound filet as far as the eye can see. Get comfy, it's gonna be a while. This thing's huge. Get the new Kentucky Fried Chicken Sandwich for just $3.99. It's finger-licking good.
Have you heard? Join me, Heather Darling, weekly for a different spin on politics, business, law, and other key issues you will not want to miss right here on RVN TV.
Look at this crazy calzone from those brainiacs at Little Caesars.
Is it more pizza or more calzone?
Pizza. Calzone. Confused. Pizza. Calzone.
We're not Big Pizza, we're Little Caesars. The new crazy calzone for $8.49.
Pizza.
still in here?
Oh, yeah.
You're really good.
Perfect timing. Your turn. Nintendo Switch. That's my way to play.
Welcome back to Family Business World. And so, Darin, I want to continue our fascinating conversation. I'm learning so much. And so, your book, as I said, I can't wait to read it. You have a picture of it? Okay, Dodge Bomb.
Right here.
All right, Darin. So what prompted you to write that book?
Yes, so a couple things. So one, I kind of wanted to capture what it was like to go to Iraq and deploy.
Wow.
I found when I was transitioning out of the Army and going to business school, I would just have a lot of trouble relating to my civilian counterparts, like what even being in the military was. And most of them would sort of fixate on misnomers of like, well, you know, if you're in the military, you're like a special forces guy, you're running around and you're like chasing Osama bin Laden. And I just wanted to, you know, just explain that there's just so much more to the military than that very small, you know, vantage point there of the special forces community. So it was an attempt, without getting into too much jargon or whatever, to really explain to the common person what is being in the military, what is deploying to Iraq. And then also, too, part of it was like kind of like a healing, like a transition phase for me, because I got out of the Army probably earlier than I predicted. I always thought I'd just make a career of it. But sort of post Iraq, a lot of soldiers and whatnot just kind of got fed up with the non expeditionary army. That they didn't want to go back to the States and just play games in garrison. And I needed to talk about that and maybe be a little sarcastic and make fun of the military and our policy making and our decision making cycles to kind of heal and transition to the next stage of my life.
So it was very cathartic. And how long did it take you to write the book?
If you believe it, it took me 7 years.
Oh, wow. And were you taking notes along the way? Is that just typing chapters? Is that?
Yeah. So it's so I collected some war diaries from my 2 Iraq tours that served as basis. But I didn't really start writing until I made the decision to get out of the military in like 2014.
Okay.
And then, you know, it's easier to do these things in hindsight, but we all have to then like find the next stage of our life, get the day job and whatnot. So I couldn't just be like a full-time writer.
Right.
So I'd write for portions and then I'd stop and have to figure out my life, go to school or whatever. So, you know, all from beginning to end, from getting out of the Army to going through business school to then starting a new career, and writing and editing and formatting, the whole kit and caboodle. Took 7 years.
So take the audience through. So the book begins, you know, how do you begin the book, and walk us through kind of the sections of the book, if you would.
Yeah. So it's fiction. It's a novel, but it corresponds very closely to my experiences.
Right.
And the book revolves around the main character, who's a young Army lieutenant who's sent straight from school to join a unit downrange in Iraq that's already been there for many months. So he's sent singularly. You know, he's not sent with his whole unit, just sent by himself forward to be a casualty replacement and take over for another lieutenant who'd been killed or replaced, and then he just has to figure out what Iraq is.
Right.
What's going on? What's his mission? Just survive in this foreign alien land. And then on top of that, as he gets adjusted and he gets integrated with his unit, he realizes it's more complex than that.
Right.
It's not just, going on patrols and fighting bad guys, fighting Al-Qaeda. He realizes there's a lot of organizational politics. There's officers within his unit don't like each other. Some are careerists, some aren't good, some are great. And he also realized that the Arabs have a vote too.
Right.
That there's Sunni and Shia Arabs in his sector, and they want to, work with him, but they have their own competing goals.
Right.
And he has to sort of just, travel and work through all these problems, and then inevitably, because it's combat,
right.
His unit starts to take some losses, and they do some action, and he has to deal with that as a person and kind of come to terms, like, what is all this, and make sense of it.
Yeah, and dealing with loss. I mean, you obviously talk about that in the book. I mean, how do you deal as a human being with the loss of someone that you knew or somebody you were close to?
I mean, to oversimplify it, it's devastating.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think people or soldiers, you get so focused maybe on a mission that if a buddy or a friend or even just an acquaintance that you know got killed or wounded or whatever, they're just sort of removed from the picture, and you compartmentalize it.
Right.
It could erroneously almost feel for a moment like, oh, they've just been transferred away or something.
Right.
But then later there's this gravity that person's not coming back.
Right.
And there's a mourning and kind of just a questioning of, was it worth it?
Right.
With your peers to discuss, and it's just something that's devastating and hard, and you deal with it hopefully stoically, moving forward as a person.
One of the things is I've talked to folks who served overseas. We've talked about entrepreneurship, and so often they've said, well, democracy, getting people to vote isn't what really keeps this country together. It's really entrepreneurship, the opportunity to grow and develop. And so has the military ever embraced that as part of it's not just helping people have democracy or the ability to vote, but to really help them create businesses and livelihoods and other things? Is that a new strategy, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So believe it or not, the military realizes that, that American entrepreneurial spirit, capitalism wins hearts and minds. And that was something we did in Iraq. Is that we realized for Reconstruction, if you incentivize small business owners to build businesses, or if you pay them contracts to build back schools and utilities and roads and whatnot, that encourages all those things, and then builds up those Western liberal democratic values in the country. So we would actually have contracts that we would award after a vetting process to local Arabs and organizations to make them build businesses and build back their communities. So the Army definitely recognizes that. And I can sort of talk about it a little bit in the book, that we actually even pay essentially a local militia of Sunni villagers to protect their town from Al-Qaeda. And we pay them money, and we pay it directly to them, so that we don't pay to some sheikh who takes a cut, or doesn't give them the money. And we, money is a weapon system, and we directly gave it to local Iraqis to protect their towns.
And I've become somewhat even evangelical about entrepreneurship as the answer to so much of what's going wrong in this world. Because if you give people, and it's heartening to hear. I've had a lot of people come back and say the Army needs to do more of that. It's great to hear that they're doing that, but it just changes livelihoods, and I think we need to utilize entrepreneurship much more in this country to deal with crime and other types of things. And so what are some of the big things that you take away as you've been there, as you write the book? What kind of thoughts do you want to share with the audience, or those that are in the military or thinking about it? But what were your takeaways?
Yeah, I think that people don't have the best viewpoints of what our military does overseas. I think they think it's like imperialism or badness in whatever sort of way. And again, I completely disagree. It's American exponentialism, entrepreneurship, idealism being broadcast overseas to give people a chance to stand up democracies and make their own forms of government where they have representation. And often, like, these experiments don't work out. I mean, we saw with like Afghanistan, unfortunately. And it's always hard to promote democracy overseas. It's messy, it's expensive. Other countries and cultures sometimes don't initially understand, like, or agree with our American form of democratic government. But it was always worth it. And we give people a chance to self-govern against these autocracies out there. And when people try to, simplify it or, deconstruct it, and they say, we're just like chasing oil or something overseas, it's like, no, like, we gave them more than we ever got from them. And I regret none of it. I don't have any regrets from going to Iraq and giving people a chance at democracy. And I hope they take it and they forge a great country out of it. But at the end of the day, it's also their choice to take with it what they will from us.
Well, Darin, we're almost at the end of time, and I wanted your thoughts on this. So, so they created a Space Force. I'm thinking that we need to create an entrepreneur force, like they have the Space Force. And the idea is to go in, because I really wonder why people don't do entrepreneurship, but the reality is that if you create entrepreneurs, you create independent thinkers. And these governments don't want independent thinkers, so that's the best revenue. What do you think about that? What do you think about the idea of creating an entrepreneur force to go around the world to really help support entrepreneurship?
Yeah, and I think it just need to be articulated better, maybe. Or wouldn't that be great if, like, that was because a lot of people say, like, oh, before you go to college, maybe you should join the military or join the Peace Corps or something like that. All like great programs. But yeah, why couldn't we have like an entrepreneur force, that maybe in conjunction with the Peace Corps or the military or something, to go out there and just,
and make a difference, and make a difference.
That.
Darin, I want to thank you. The time always goes by so quickly. Fascinating stuff. I want to wish you the best of luck with this. So thousands of people will see this. So hopefully you'll get thousands of orders. So Darin Pepple.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dale. I really appreciate your time. You had really good questions. Again, Dodgebomb, Outside the Wire, the Second Iraq War.
On Amazon?
Darin Pepple. It's on Amazon.
Please
check
perfect.
it out.
Excellent.
Thanks for your time,
Great.
Dr.
Thank you all for watching Family Business World. Darin, thanks again, and we will see you next week. Take care.